You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. I've got to start with the bombshell news out of Philadelphia. According to Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Ben Simmons has told the 76ers hierarchy that he isn't going to report to training camp and he wants to be traded. Moreover, according to Jason Dumas of Bleacher Report, the smart money is on Tyrese Maxey being included in a Simmons trade. In case you're wondering what the connection between Simmons and Maxey is, they are both represented by Rich Paul. In fact, to give you a sense of how toxic this situation is, some charitable organizations contacted Maxey and wanted him to be a part of community events. But Rich Paul supposedly got into Maxey's ear and said, don't ingrain yourself into this community if you could be traded soon. Now, I will say this. Dumas followed that up by saying that Maxey's excited about this coming Sixers season, and Rich Paul doesn't want Maxey out of Philly, but sorry, Jason, you stoked the flames here. Clearly there's something there. Maybe this is like protection of Maxey, because I know that the Sixers really like Maxey. They didn't want to include him in a James Harden trade. So they may have said to Rich Paul, look, we'll trade Simmons, but there's no scenario where we trade Maxey also. Get it out of your head. It's not going to happen. So if that's what happened, Paul and Maxey have to do some damage control. Look, maybe the Maxey situation is up in the air, but I think it's highly likely that Simmons gets traded sooner rather than later. I don't blame Simmons 1 minute for being upset with the Sixers. That situation is untenable. After Simmons laid an egg against the Hawks in the Eastern Conference semifinals, you had Sixers fans killing him. There were trade rumors galore. I mean, we heard a bunch of rumors in the lead up to the NBA draft about Simmons. He was going to go to the Warriors. He was going to go to DC. He was going to go to Toronto. He was going to go to the Spurs. He was going to go to the Trailblazers. These were all rumors that we heard in the lead up to the NBA draft. Both parties, the 76ers and Simmons, were in lockstep on this. That's from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. Those are his words. They're in step with a move elsewhere. It's not in Ben Simmons' best interest to stay with the Sixers long term. The Sixers tried to make it work. They tried to add a ton of shooting, but the reality is, with Joel Embiid there, it's not going to work. You can't have two guys on the floor for 30 minutes every night that can't shoot. Joel Embiid is not a great shooter. Has it gotten better? The answer is yes. There's no question. But he still only hit 37.7% of his threes last year. That's not great. Like, if I'm playing against Joel Embiid and he flares out to beyond the arc, I'm daring him to shoot. Yes, I want you out there instead of in the low post where you're going to destroy me. I'll take my chances with you beyond the arc. And we all know that Ben Simmons can't shoot. He'll never be able to shoot. You pair the two of them together, it's not going to work. Combine that with the fact that Simmons was god-awful against the Hawks, and any fans that Simmons may have had in the city of brotherly love turned against him after that absolutely dismal performance, you understand why everyone was motivated to get a Simmons trade done. The thing is, though, it's September 1st. We're less than 2 months away from the Sixers' first game of the season. That's going to take place on October 20th in New Orleans. You take a look at the Sixers roster, you still see Ben Simmons there. So, wait a minute. You wanted to trade Simmons. You can't say you didn't want to. You had talked about trading him for James Harden. You had talked about trading him for Bradley Beal. You had talked about a sign-and-trade with Kyle Lowry. You had talked about a super trade involving Damian Lillard. There was a report from Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer before the draft that said that the Sixers offered Simmons to the Warriors. Now look, the Sixers were asking for an arm and a leg. From the Warriors, they wanted Andrew Wiggins, James Wiseman, the 7th and 14th overall picks, and 2 future first-rounders. So that's, in essence, 5 first-rounders for Ben Simmons. James Wiseman was the 2nd overall pick in not this past NBA draft, the draft prior. You can look at him as a first-rounder. that shine is still there. And from the Spurs, the Sixers supposedly wanted 4 first-rounders, 3 first-round pick swaps, and a young player. It's okay to set your price high, but you've got to be willing to come down. If it's out there publicly that you want to trade Ben Simmons, and you're talking with all these teams, there is a timer on your leverage. That timer is basically run out right now. Realize, it's September 1st. Every team in the NBA has their roster set. I mean, let's think about some of those teams that I mentioned previously. Do you really think they're still interested in Simmons? The Heat aren't. They just signed Kyle Lowry. The Raptors aren't. They can't do a Lowry sign and trade. At this very moment, Damian Lillard seems to be content with the Trailblazers, so Portland's out. The Wizards are out. They want to try to make Spencer Dinwiddie and Bradley Beal work. You've lost a lot of leverage here. I'd be very surprised if you got a king's ransom for Ben Simmons. Fortunately for the Sixers, you haven't lost all your leverage. We did hear other teams in the mix. And I could see some of these teams swinging a blockbuster trade, even though we're less than 2 months away from the start of the NBA season. If the Timberwolves are willing to throw in Anthony Edwards, I could see them still being a possibility. Colin Sexton for Simmons makes sense. The Pacers have a ton of quality players that they could throw into a package for Simmons. If the Kings are going to trade either De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Halliburton, they still make sense. I think the Spurs are out. I don't think they're going to trade that many draft picks, and I don't think the Warriors are that interested in Simmons. You have lost a lot of leverage, there's no question, but you're still going to have teams vying for Simmons' services. And it's in your best interest, if you're Daryl Morey, to rip the Band-Aid off and trade him now. His old team, the Houston Rockets, just dealt with this. They tried to make James Harden work. It failed miserably. And the Rockets were one of the worst teams in the NBA last year. You don't want this hanging over your head. Rip the Band-Aid off now. I mean, one other thing that you've got to realize on the point of leverage, if Ben Simmons is really willing to sit out camp, and if that extends into the regular season, the leverage that the Sixers have is going to get lower and lower and lower. Hey, we're okay to ride this out. It's no problem. We'll ride out the storm. Meanwhile, you're suffering because you don't have your best perimeter defender and a point guard that can do everything except shoot threes and hit free throws. Necessary elements of a point guard's game, don't get me wrong, but still, Ben Simmons is a really good player. Like, I'll take him. I did work this out on the NBA trade machine. Ben Simmons and Tyrese Maxey for Joe Harris, DeAndre Jordan, and Cam Thomas. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, okay? There's no way on this earth that the Sixers would do that trade. Forget the fact that it's a lackluster package. The Nets don't have any picks to throw in, and you're trading him to a rival, but one of the benefits of being a fan of a good NBA team is working out trade possibilities for really talented players that become available. And Ben Simmons would fit on the Nets. Think about this starting five. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, and Nick Claxton. On the bench, Patty Mills, Tyrese Maxey, Bruce Brown, Blake Griffin, and Day'Ron Sharpe. That team has the potential to win 65 games. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, it's not, but let me have a little fun as a Nets fan. Come on. I've waited a long time for this. One thing that we've learned with these players making trade requests is that it's better to rip the Band-Aid off sooner rather than later. The Rockets tried to make it work with Harden. It didn't work. If the Texans had been quicker to trade Deshaun Watson and were willing to take a little less to get rid of the headache, to get rid of the problem, to remove the cloud from the organization that was his trade request before the sexual assault allegations became public, the Texans would be in a much better spot than they are now. I understand it's a different sport, but there is a parallel. Realize, if the Texans were a little more aggressive in wanting to trade Watson, they'd probably have Zach Wilson right now. Now, what's the best they can hope for? Tua Tagovailoa? I'll take Wilson. If you let this play out, the offers may get worse and worse and worse. Maybe a guy like Anthony Edwards or Colin Sexton absolutely balls out and their teams say, wait a minute, we don't want to trade these guys anymore. These guys are too good. We want to keep them around. Sometimes the best trades are the ones you don't make. Case in point, Mariano Rivera for Felix Fermin. I'm not kidding. That almost happened. In summation, the Sixers really need to rip the Band-Aid off now. You're not going to gain anything by keeping him around. You're not going to engender goodwill from Simmons. You're not going to engender goodwill from Rich Paul, one of the most powerful agents in the sport. And you're not going to engender goodwill from other players. Wait a minute. We know that you were willing to trade this guy. Now you've changed your mind? Wait a minute, don't go back on your word like that. I don't like that. I don't want to play for you if you're going to do that. Rip the Band-Aid off now. You'll still get a really good haul. Like Anthony Edwards and 2 or 3 first-rounders, or Colin Sexton and 2 or 3 first-rounders, is a great get. The longer you let this situation drag out, the more risk you have of losing any leverage that you still have. It's in everyone's best interest for Ben Simmons to not be a 76er next year. Daryl Morey has to make that happen. Moving on now to the Hawks, signing Clint Capela to a 2-year extension worth $46.9 million. And this is kind of interesting. Clint Capela was already signed through the 22-23 season. So Capela is now locked up for the next 4 seasons. The Hawks were very aggressive in locking him up long term, and you know what? I understand why, because Clint Capela is one of the best centers in the NBA. He's not in the Gobert, Jokic, and Towns tier, but he's in the tier below. Here's a guy who's averaged double-doubles in the past 4 seasons. He led the NBA in rebounds per game last year with 14.3. He finished 6th in Defensive Player of the Year voting last year. He's a really, really good player. Him and John Collins together is one of the best front courts in the NBA. Now, I'll say this. I was disappointed in how Capela played in the playoffs. He wasn't awful by any stretch. It's not like he was Ben Simmons, but I did want him to step his game up a little bit more. He averaged 15.2 points per game in the regular season. He only averaged 10.1 points per game in the playoffs. He averaged 14.3 rebounds per game in the regular season. That went down to 11.2 rebounds per game in the playoffs. He averaged 2 blocks per game in the regular season. That went down to 1.1 blocks per game. I was underwhelmed by Capela's playoff performance. Like when we were talking about the Hawks in the playoffs last year, how many times did we mention Capela? We mentioned Trae Young. We mentioned Bogdan Bogdanovic. We mentioned John Collins. We mentioned Danilo Gallinari. We mentioned Kevin Huerter. We mentioned Lou Williams. I seriously can't think of a playoff game last year where Capela just balled out. That was a little disappointing to me, but all in all, he's still a really good player. I take him on my team in a minute. Capela's 27, so yeah, he'll still be good. in 4 years. This is a good move by the Hawks. I like it a lot. But I do want to see Capela step his game up in the playoffs. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And I'll start with my beloved Jets trading Chris Herndon and a 6th rounder in this coming draft. Specifically, the Niners' 6th rounder that they got in the Jordan Willis trade to the Vikings in exchange for a 4th rounder in this coming draft. I've said in the past that I'm a self-hating Islanders fan. I've criticized Islanders fans a lot in the past. Why do I feel like I'm starting to get there with the Jets? The praise that Joe Douglas is getting for this trade is nothing short of sickening to me. This is not a good trade. It's not a horrible trade. No one's gonna mistake Chris Herndon for Mickey Schuler anytime soon. But I gotta be honest with you, I really thought that Chris Herndon could have a bounce-back season. Playing with a better quarterback, playing under a better coach, playing under a better offensive coordinator, I thought he could get back to the player that we saw his rookie season, where he had a lot of potential. I really thought he was going to have a bounce-back season. Not a great season. It's not like I was targeting him in fantasy or something, but I actually thought he'd be pretty solid. Now, this tight end depth chart is beyond bad. You know it's bad when Tyler Croft is the unquestioned starter. He's the guy who's being penciled in to start 16 games. Forget the fact that he hasn't started 16 games since 2017. These are his stats through his last 3 seasons. 22 catches for 226 yards and 4 touchdowns. What did Chris Herndon do just last year? He had 31 catches for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns. Holla freaking Lulia. Tyler Croft caught 1 more touchdown pass than Chris Herndon did in the last 3 seasons. Herndon has more catches overall. Herndon has more receiving yards overall. There's no doubt about it. Chris Herndon's the better player. Come on, be reasonable. Who would you rather have? The 25-year-old tight end? Or someone who's missed 22 games the last 3 seasons? Someone who's only started 9 games in those 3 seasons? See, the sad part is, this isn't even like highway robbery or anything. That's not my point. Joe Douglas didn't get fleeced here. If I'm looking at this trade in a bubble, I'd say, okay, I disagree with it. I think the Vikings won it. Irv Smith Jr. is going to be out for the year, so the Vikings needed to add a tight end. Sure, go out and trade for Chris Herndon. That makes a ton of sense for them. As for the Jets, they made their tight end core worse. Yes, they got a 4th rounder, but I don't think that's worth making a shaky position even shakier. I'll say this, I've seen people say that the Vikings overpaid for Herndon. Yeah, maybe in a perfect world, they'd have given up just a fifth. But the Vikings were desperate, so they overpaid a little. It's not a great trade for the Vikings, and it's definitely not a great trade for the Jets. The Vikings won it. That's all I would have said if this trade was done in a bubble. But seeing the reaction from Jets fans just ticks me off. People saying Joe Douglas is God. Joe Douglas is king. What a great job in getting another pick. The Jets now have 10 picks in the upcoming draft. 7 in the first 4 rounds. Oh my freaking God! I can't believe that I need to have this conversation again. Picks mean nothing if you use them incorrectly. And Joe Douglas has shown an inability to use picks correctly. Let's look at the Jets' 2020 NFL draft class. The Jets made 9 picks. Mekhi Becton looks like he's going to be a stud, okay? No complaints there. Home run pick. Franchise stalwart. The next DeBrickashaw. No complaints there whatsoever. We're off to a good start. The thing is, though, it's all downhill from here. Denzel Mims, buried on the wide receiver depth chart. Ashton Davis had a bad rookie season. Only played in 8 games, had a 53 overall grade from Pro Football Focus. The eye test backs that up. It doesn't seem like he's going to be anything special in this league. Jabari Zuniga is buried on the depth chart right now. He had an opportunity to really stake his claim for the Jets after Carl Lawson and Vinnie Curry went down, but the Jets felt compelled to go outside the organization for help. That's a knock on Zuniga. He had just a 33 overall grade last year. He was absolutely atrocious. LaMichael Pirine is buried on the depth chart. James Morgan was cut. Cameron Clark has missed his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Bryce Hall and Braden Mann look solid, but they're not world beaters. Come on, people, be reasonable. You want to tell me that he hit on Zach Wilson, that he hit on AVT, that he hit on Elijah Moore, and all those guys? Can they prove it, please? You know, scouting is great, but before we say that this guy's the next Jimmy Johnson, can these guys get through their rookie season, please? No one loves Zach Wilson more than me. I have an autographed football of his in my office. I like Elijah Vera Tucker a lot. I have a t-shirt of his. I think Elijah Moore is going to be a really good player in this league. But can they prove it first, please? Can we get through their rookie season before we start praising the GM? You know, it's great to say right after the fact that those were good picks, but once you take your scouting hat off and you put your team cap on, you've got to realize that these players need to prove it. A lot of Jets fans were high on Sam Darnold coming out of USC. pretty damn obvious that he wasn't going to work out with the Jets. I'll repeat something that I tweeted at Real Jacob Valk. The only correct feeling toward Douglas is that of skepticism. Until this roster that is composed of his guys, make no mistake about it, the vast majority of the players on the Jets now were brought in by Douglas. Until that roster shows that they can win, I'm gonna be jaded. And you need to be too. This is the freaking Jets we're talking about. This is a team that just went 2-14. This is a GM that inherited a roster that went 7-9, tore it down, and then saw it go 2-14. That let Robbie Anderson walk, that whiffed in free agency. I'm not talking this free agency, last free agency. Bringing in guys like Flacco, Gore, Perryman, Fant, Van Roten, McGovern, etc. That didn't work. To anoint Joe Douglas as the second coming when his teams haven't even sniffed the playoffs is ludicrous. Now you want to tell me that this is going to look bad in a few years when Zach Wilson and Robert Saleh lead the Jets to the playoffs? Firstly, let me say that I do think that Wilson and Saleh will do very good things for the Jets down the line. I love Wilson and I love Saleh. I really, really do. The thing is, though, nothing that I say now isn't gonna hold up. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Joe Douglas is John Idzik 2.0. He's not. He should be commended for getting 2 firsts for Jamal Adams. At the time, the Leonard Williams trade was a coup for the Jets. The Sam Darnold trade, I think, is going to turn into highway robbery for the Jets. But picks mean nothing unless you use them correctly. And I haven't seen anything outside of Mekhi Becton working out to show that Joe Douglas is a good drafter. Hitting on a first rounder isn't enough. And that wasn't an exotic pick. Okay, yes, there were a bunch of directions that the Jets could have gone in, but Becton was one of those guys. It really wasn't an exotic pick. And in order to be a great GM, you've got to hit on more than your first rounders. Hallelujah, you hit on your first rounders. Mekhi Becton, future Pro Bowler. Zach Wilson, future Pro Bowler. Elijah Vera Tucker, future Pro Bowler. Okay, for argument's sake, I'll say that definitively, even though I think it's very possible that those guys will hit those marks at some point. I love those guys. I really, really do. But once you get past the first round, that's where the hard part starts. Go through all the rosters of the best teams in the NFL. The Buccaneers, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the Packers, etc. Look at how many day 2 and 3 picks are on those rosters. Do you think that Denzel Mims is going to be on the Jets when they make the playoffs? I don't. Same thing holds for Davis, Zuniga, Pirine, Clark. I mean, for God's sake, you're praising the man for getting an extra 4th rounder when he just cut one of his 4th rounders before he ever got into a damn game. I mean, come on! I saw Joe Caporoso say that was an Adam Gase pick. Oh my God. So let me get this straight. If Mims doesn't work out, is he a Gase pick? Will that hold for Davis? Will that hold for Zuniga? Will that hold for Pirine? Will that hold for Clark? Oh, but Becton, he was a Douglas pick. Gase had nothing to do with that, right? I don't want to defend Adam Gase. I know that's a losing argument. But the hypocrisy with a guy like Caporoso is real. And I've challenged him on numerous occasions. He hasn't manned up. And I pay for his stuff on Patreon. I think he genuinely wants what's best for the Jets. And I think overall he has a solid head on his shoulders. But for God's sake, if you can't see how hypocritical it is to not blame Joe Douglas at all for the James Morgan pick, I can't help you. Jets fans, take off the green and white colored glasses. Realize that this guy needs to prove that he can hit on his draft picks. He did not prove that last year for the most part. Yes, he hit on Becton. Yeah, Hall seems like a solid player. And same thing with Braden Mann. But that leaves 6 guys that didn't work out. If you don't have an issue with that, I can't help you. This guy needs to prove that he can build a winner. So far, he hasn't done that. Moving on now to the Ravens, trading Ben Bredeson, a 5th rounder in this coming draft, and a 7th rounder in the 2023 draft to the Giants in exchange for a 4th rounder in this coming draft. And I'll give Dave Gettleman credit for this. He realizes that he really needs to beef up his offensive line. The thing is, though, that should have been done in the draft or free agency, not trading for guys who presumably would have been cut if you didn't trade for him. I mean, realize, the other day, the Giants traded B.J. Hill to the Bengals for Billy Price. So the Giants sacrificed D-line depth in exchange for O-line depth. That's all well and good. There's not much to discuss there, but it shows that the Giants did have a major issue on their O-line if they made 2 trades in 2 days to beef it up. And when you have a quarterback like Daniel Jones, you've got to give him not just a solid, not just a good, but a great O-line to make him successful. He's not that good. Yeah, let's put a fumble-prone quarterback behind a bad offensive line. That'll work, right? My God, the Giants are going to be bad. Trading for Bredeson makes sense, as did trading for Price. The thing is, though, there are just better ways to upgrade the O-line. It's hard for me to applaud Gettleman for these trades since he did nothing to upgrade the O-line in free agency, and he did nothing to upgrade the O-line in the draft. Where are you going to get the better players? Free agency, the draft, or cut down day? The answer definitely isn't cut down day. But if I'm looking at this trade in a bubble, I understand it. I liked Bredesen coming out of Michigan. I thought he had a bright future. I thought the Ravens did a good job with that pick. He didn't show it last year. He only played 48 snaps and didn't set the world on fire when he played. He had just a 47.4 overall grade. His pass blocking grade, though, was outstanding, 74.9. So, hey, Jones should like that. You gotta wonder the wisdom of trading all this depth. Realize the Ravens traded Sean Wade, they traded Greg Mance, now they're trading Bredesen. Here's hoping the injury bug doesn't bite them this year, and if it does, here's hoping that the guys on their roster can fill those holes, because the Ravens got rid of some talented players. Realize, they just got rid of their 5th rounder in this past draft, and now they're getting rid of their 4th rounder in the draft prior. That's not good. I understand that they're getting a 4th rounder back, but they also kicked in a 5th and a 7th. That's not good. That's like trading a 4th, a 5th, and a 7th for a 4th. That's not going to work. This trade makes sense for the Giants. I'll say they won it, and I'm really concerned about the Ravens' depth. But the Ravens have earned the right for me to give their scouting department the benefit of the doubt. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. And I'll start with a couple stories that I just missed. Here's what happened, okay? Yesterday, I wasn't in hockey mode, so I kind of skipped over prohockeyrumors.com. I figured it's August 31st. What's going to happen? Then I heard the news that the Islanders signed a bunch of guys, so it's like, okay, let me go on Pro Hockey Rumors and see what I missed. I actually missed a lot, so let's get into it now. Specifically, the Predators signing Elie Tovanin to a 3-year deal worth $4.35 million. That's an AAV of $1.45 million, and I really like this move. Tovanin struggled to find his footing in the NHL. Through his first 3 seasons with the Predators, he only got into 7 games. He didn't play at all in 1920. Then he got an opportunity last year and played really well. He had 22 points in 40 games. He got some Calder Trophy votes. He was not good defensively. He was a -10. But you know what? If you're going to pay a young, offensive-minded forward less than $1.5 million for 3 years, you'll get nothing but praise from me. This guy's 22. There's still time for him to get better. In fact, I think he'll keep getting better. This is an outstanding move for the Predators. They had a shaky offseason, seeing guys like Victor Arvidsson, Eric Howla, and Cale Yarncroc leave, but locking up Tovanin is a really, really good move for them. Good job by David Poile, one of the best GMs in the league. Moving on now to the Blackhawks, signing Connor Murphy to a 4-year extension worth $17.6 million. That's $4.4 million a year. And I'm not crazy about this move. This is a little bit of an overpay. I understand that Murphy was going to be an unrestricted free agent after this coming season. So with that comes the inevitable overpayment. But you don't need to be the team to do it. Wouldn't you rather see another team overpay for your guy and then sign someone else to replace him to a reasonable rate rather than jump the gun on overpaying him? Murphy's not a bad player. He's a solid top 4 or top 6 defenseman, but you're paying him a little too much for that role. Last year, Murphy had 15 points in 50 games. He was a +1. He's very talented defensively. Offensively, he leaves a little bit to be desired. But defensively, he's really, really good. I like Murphy. He's a solid player. The thing is, though, I can't get behind this overpayment. I would have liked Murphy to have gotten, like, 3 to 3.5 mil. I don't mind the 4 years. Murphy's young. He's only 28. But I can't get behind the money. Bad job by the Blackhawks. Alright, now it's time to get to the Islanders. The Islanders announced that they re-signed Anthony Beauvillier, Casey Suzekis, Kyle Palmieri, and Ilya Sorokin. That's official. It took a long time to get here, but it's official now. They didn't announce specifics, but according to Chris Johnston of Sportsnet, Beauvillier is getting a 3-year deal worth $12.45 million. Suzekis is getting a 6-year deal worth $15 million. Palmieri's getting a 4-year deal worth $20 million. And Sorokin's getting a 3-year deal worth $12 million. Let's go in order. The Islanders had to bring Beauvillier back. I understand that he hasn't set the world on fire. Only one 20-goal season. He's never scored more than 40 points. But who were you going to replace him with? You don't have the money to replace him with anyone. You want to tell me Vladimir Tarasenko? That would have made sense, but I'll tell you, Beauvillier's cheaper. And the Islanders are in cap hell, there's no question about that. I mean, Beauvillier's a solid player. Homegrown Islander, was part of the great Griffin Reinhart trade that got the Islanders Matthew Barzal also. With the second pick that the Oilers gave the Islanders for Reinhart, they traded up to get Beauvillier. And I'll say this, Beauvillier's a really good playoff performer. In the bubble, he put up 14 points in 22 games. And last year, he put up 13 points in 19 games. I like Beauvillier. I have no problem with the Islanders bringing him back. Maybe this is the tiniest bit of an overpay, but I'm not going to bang tables over it. Casey Suzekis, I'm actually not crazy about. I thought the Islanders could let him walk. I understand that Suzekis is part of that fourth line, a fan favorite, gritty player. I've had dinner with him, he's a nice guy. The thing is, though, you already have Leo Komarov. Why wouldn't you just put Komarov at fourth line center? That could have worked. I promise you that could have worked. You would have lost nothing in doing that. You could have put Richard Panik at third line left wing, paired him with Pajot and Wahlstrom. That would have made a ton of sense. Instead, you're overpaying for Suzekis. $2.5 million is fair. There's no question. But he's not worth 6 years. Wouldn't you rather have Komarov and Panik play those roles rather than have Suzekis for 6 years? I understand that the 6 years is to bring the AAV down. The Islanders did it for Matt Martin. I'm just not crazy about this move. I think that money could have been better spent elsewhere. Kyle Palmieri makes a ton of sense. Once the Islanders lost Jordan Eberle to the Kraken, they absolutely had to bring Palmieri back. He's going to be the first line right winger. Admittedly, I'm a little concerned about that, because in 17 regular season games, Palmieri only put up 4 points for the Islanders. But in the playoffs, Palmieri was great. He had 7 goals and 9 points in 19 games. Local kid from Smithtown, Lou Lamoriello obviously knows him very well from his days with the Devils. I have no problem bringing Palmieri back. I'd have rather had Eberle, but I like Palmieri. No complaints whatsoever. And Ilya Sorokin is part of a great 1A, 1B tandem with Semyon Varlamov in net for the Islanders. Sorokin was obviously one of the main reasons why the Islanders won the Penguin series. Every game that the Islanders won in that series, Sorokin got the win. Varlamov laid an egg in that series. But then Sorokin laid an egg in Game 1 of the Bruins series. Varlamov stepped up, carried the Islanders there, carried the Islanders in the Lightning series. It wasn't his fault that the Islanders couldn't score in Game 7. Oh, that was a tough loss. Good job in bringing back Sorokin. I love this 1A, 1B setup. And if Varlamov moves on from the Islanders when his contract is up in a couple years, I have no problem with Sorokin being the unquestioned starter. Until tomorrow, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.